The first and last. The boy across the table squinted his one eye and Samantha Ballum's coffee bubbled. As her morning glory brew overran her mug, he looked at her aloofly. She pushed back her chair with a start. The hairs of her body on end, she slammed open the heavy reinforced steel door of the interview room. Thus began the day she discovered what it meant to be the last of a kind. The day she realized she had lived 40 solstices without knowing the reality of her condition. Like that last Tasmanian tiger preserved on black and white film, she had learned about in school, whose wide grin and obliviousness of the absence of all like him haunted her as a child. She shoved Harold's chair with a swift nudge of her high heels and he rolled out of the way to the visual feed. Harold remained calm, although there was a restraint to his face that was unnerving. Samantha knew she had but little time, but she was not going to pass up the opportunity to replay what she saw happen. Replay, 2 minutes ago, Zoom coffee mug. The screen showed her hand cradle the mug, move it from side to side playfully and then violently begin to shake until it spilled all over the table. "Bullshit," she said. She could hear the jackboot sound of boots coming down the hall. Harold reached for his sidearm. Samantha pulled first, but her weapon was disabled. Harold fired repeatedly, green and red lines burst the screen and wall behind her full of charred holes. It was inconceivable that he could have missed, but he had. She would later regret what she did, thinking he must have made a show of trying to stop her, but in that moment she had taken a step forward and planted her right long stiletto heel 4 inches into Harold's left eye. The boots were closer and she posted up against the wall near the doorway. In front of her, the spectator class roared inaudibly behind the violence-proof glass of the education access point. She was sure this wasn't what the builders had hoped the outside ones would learn about life on the inside. She noticed Harold's weapon was still glowing. Administration could be so lax, so lazy, always someone else's job to think. She crouched to retrieve the weapon and posted back up against the wall. The r/greater than the boots had stopped. The feed to the room had been blasted, they were dark. The kid on the other side of the one-way glass waved at her as if he knew exactly when she turned to see him. Soon a jackboot would edge his foot across the threshold and she would have the semblance of a shield and a decoy, but not one that would be intimidated by threat. Her best bet was to terminate him, shove him out and run backwards blasting. So as soon as the jackboot inched its rubber toe into sight, she spun around and pumped a line into his face. He fell back into a volley of fire from his comrades and she ran backwards toward Main Street. All around her fire and destruction, but not a hair on her freshly done hair was singed. That a Main Street lettering and its iconic image of Mom, Dad, 2 kids and a dog spelled certain doom. But she had no choice and something inside impelled her toward the hope of seeing the sky and breathing the air one last time before departing GeoYears for good. But outside there was no half-second of intense communion with her world and then boom. As she had expected. Only the trickle of the center fountain circled by tossing penny wishers and the sight of kites filling the massive expanse of grass girding Mordham Fort and its pointy cathedral-like sentries. The coffee and now this unnatural survivability left her confused. Her whole world began to feel like a cobweb that only tangled and clung to her with greater tenacity the more she fought it. But determined to fight it she was. She knew she was safe on Main Street. And she also knew, now, that it was a lie that criminals would suddenly burst into fireballs if they dared enter the hallowed grounds of pleasantry and family wholesome fun. Had she not just fought the law, murdered her fellow agents, and was she now not a fugitive from justice? She had only 2 options now. To believe the feed and declare herself incompetent. She had already been subdued and processed and sent via the intertrain to the outside. Accept the much talked about detective stress syndrome had rendered her psychotic, and in that case she was probably already safely in the outer world, slowly withering under the weight of delusion. Or, she could march on across the green fields, amongst the happy families, and with her newfound invincibility go to see the chief architect herself, Matriana Mordum, the only remaining knower of secrets. Was that not her claim to fame? Had not her revelations paved the way for the implacable year terrain to give up its hidden nature and allowed civilization overflow her with planning and ingenuity? She began her walk between the happy throng just past the myriad wood signage of Geoyears. Intent on following the arrow at the top, an arrow not of wood, but of gold designed to last forever, leading to the lowered drawbridge and open gates of the Mordum fort. The atmosphere was always agreeable on the way to the fort, the ocean making medley as it washed up on the western inner wall of Geoyears. The sweat on the inside of her black tights, sculpting her lithe but muscular frame, dried in the pleasant breeze, keeping dragons, miniature Mordum forts, and race cars flying overhead. The administration's gigantic flyer passed overhead. A kite managed from winches at the topmost sentries towered high over them all, with the motherly image of Matriana holding a year pass over a miniature Geoyears aloft in her palm. When Samantha looked down again she saw the boy, but when she turned toward him, he quickly vanished into the crowd, which constantly closed of any direct path to anywhere. Still she trusted her instincts and walked toward the country in Geoyears she thought a child of 5 of his disposition would enjoy and feel at home in. His pirate-like eye patch sprung to memory. She walked close to the ocean and found the steps leading down to the cove. Then boarded the ferry that would lead her to the ships that inhabited the waters of 1598. The boy was on the boat, and this time he had nowhere to run to. Nor did he try. His eye told her not to think too highly of herself. To consider if it had not been him who had led her there rather than her keen instincts and logic. She got near to where he sat near the veranda. "Have a chair." "Thanks," she said. "Give me a moment please. I had just dropped a token in the viewer when I spotted you." He then put his eye to the scope to catch sight of outside ones on the other side of the glass, who in turn peered through scopes to watch the inner ocean lap up against Mordum fort. The kid spoke as the scope flashed a bubble green to indicate its readiness. "How? You wish to know? But there is already a perfectly logical explanation, isn't there? The only one that anyone will ever accept. I'm not crazy. Too good for that, I suppose. No, it's not that. You feel more lucid than ever. As if you are about to get the answer to some grand thing or another. Or maybe you have just come to realize there is something special about you, something unique and important that you are and no one else is. I don't want to believe that. It's not what I want. But it is being thrust upon you? Yes. How about you let me ask a question? But first you must promise not to. What make the ocean bubble, send this ferry flying into the sky? Or some such nonsense. Sorry, but I can't control your psychotic visions. But if you ask me a question, I will answer to the best of my knowledge. How's that? Okay. There on your arm. Samantha pulled her pocket blacklight from her belt. Her weapon was still moribund but her light was working. Trespasser glowed green along his forearm. You are stamped as a criminal. But you are out of Justice Hall and have not blown to smithereens. May I? The kid scanned the exact spot on her arm. And murderer, traitor, fugitive lit up. My crime pales. The kid swung around the scope. Take a look. Tell me what you see. You said you would answer. I can't claim the credit. Maybe it was one of them. Take a look. It's cracking. I wanted it to happen. Soon we will be flooded, overwhelmed. I desired that. But did I cause it? I don't know. I just know that I can think about it. Wonder about something like that. Samantha now looked through the scope. The crack looked like a lightning bolt spreading its beams further and further into the night. I have come to wonder a great many things lately, and I have looked into things around here. The nursery, for example, where babies come from. Do you suppose babies always have come from there? Maybe not. Images were mixing in Samantha Ballum's imagination: the kid's eye, the bubbling coffee, the stiletto in Harold's skull, the black hole left in the jackboot's face. The question was rude, it seemed pointless, but the way the kid stroked the patch as he looked at her made it impossible to refrain. Why did you do that to yourself? Break the rules. Go where I shouldn't. No, why did you stab your eye and pull it out with a fork? Because, my dear, that is where all boundary effects are triggered in Sims like me. That is why I have not gone boom. I don't know what you are talking about. You will. It just means, it's all fake. And most of it does not care, because it can't, but for some reason I can. And for some reason so can you. But since you still have an eye, you are more of a mystery. But I'm betting you did not come from the nursery. Then the kid, spotting a galley in the short distance with a boarding net swishing in the water, said, "It is enough, perhaps we shall see one another again," and launched himself over the veranda into the choppy waters. Jackboots flooded Samantha's memory: a basket, water, parents, a black hole in her memory filled with light, with the grin of that last striped devil oblivious to what each eager step he took inside the fence really meant.